Hi, good morning everyone, and thank you so much for coming to my presentation, or at least clicking on it and watching it. My title is called Remembering English, Foreign Language Enjoyment from Elementary School to the Present. First, I'm going to go over what we're going to talk about today. So I'll give a little bit of background to myself, because I do think that plays into how this research project has been shaped and conducted. Then we're going to talk about foreign language enjoyment, which is the main theoretical background behind what we're going to talk about today. Then we'll talk about research design, so the study that I conducted, some results and discussion, and what we could do with findings and the things that we talked about today. So first, a little bit of the background, which involves talk about me a little bit. So my name is Pharo, and I'm from Canada, Montreal, Canada. And my history background, in graduate school I studied history, and I was also a history teacher in college back in Canada, really informed a lot of this research and sort of a lot of the research that I continue to do now in narrative and foreign language enjoyment. So as a history teacher, I was really interested in individual narratives, so how people, ordinary people, make sense of the present, make sense of the past, and how that relates to historical events. So in a similar way, when I transitioned to becoming an English teacher full-time as I moved to Japan, I was also interested in how students made sense of their past English experiences before they came into my classroom. So informally, on the first day of courses in university, I would ask students, do you like English? What did you like about English? What do you not like about English? And students could write this down on a little notepad and hand it in anonymously. I didn't ask for names. And really the purpose of that was to get a sense of what worked and what didn't work for them in their English study, and then try to apply some of those things that did work into my courses, and then try to avoid some of the things that didn't work for them in my courses. So for example, a lot of students said they like games, they like playing games in their previous classes in junior high school or high school, and so I tried to integrate maybe a board game here or there, or some other sort of gamified activity related to the target language of the week. Things to avoid, people would say that the teacher wasn't particularly helpful, or that it was too difficult, or there's too much grammar. And so some of those things, of course, I could try to fix, like trying to be more supportive of my students. But things like grammar, of course, I can't really avoid teaching grammar, but I could try to think of different ways to make grammar sort of speak to them, or to make it easier for them to understand. So this was all very informally done. But as I was sort of doing this for a few semesters, I decided, well, what if I turn this into an actual formal study? And so then in preparation for that, I delved into the literature on positive psychology. So positive psychology has been around for quite a while outside of education, and particularly outside of SLA. But positive psychology came in response to a heavy focus on cognitive psychology. So in particular, researchers who are focused more on the quote-unquote problems that individuals and societies and groups face as they relate to maybe anxiety or lack of motivation, fear. And so at the beginning of this century, but in particular in the last decade, there's been greater awareness and greater interest in studying positive psychology within language learning. And so what we've seen is different studies on sort of what goes well in language study, as opposed to focusing entirely on, or mostly on, what doesn't go well, or what doesn't go right, quote unquote. So we've had a variety of studies on empathy, for example, or perseverance from 2016, and even love. So within positive psychology, we're sort of branching out and trying to think about, well, within the context of studying language, what works, and what works well, and what produces positive outcomes psychologically or emotionally and mentally. And so one of the, I guess, subgroups, or one of the foci of positive psychology is foreign language enjoyment, or FLE. And so this has really been in the last 10 years that this has started to gain traction. One of the first studies that's often credited as being sort of the origin or really the root of FLE is from 2014. And within the study, Duale and McIntyre create this FLE scale, which is really a mix of quantitative and qualitative questions. I have just a few examples. So on the Likert scale, participants would rate I can be creative, so their agreement or disagreement with these sentences, or I enjoy it. I'm a worthy member of the FL class, of the foreign language class. And so through these studies, through the collection of these, through the data, many scholars, not just this original one, but quite a few, have found generally higher rates of foreign language enjoyment result in higher WTC, or willingness to communicate, and higher motivation to study the target language, but at the same time lowering anxiety. And so a lot of research has been done for English, but quite a bit has also done for Chinese as well as Persian as well. So with this in mind, I decided to conduct a study with my own students at the university that I'm teaching at. And so I also used a questionnaire to explore FLE, but I think informed by my own interest in history, I took a slightly different approach. I was interested in sort of what experiences of studying English did students bring into the university setting. So in other words, looking back as far as elementary school, or actually even a little before elementary school, how did students in the present look back and like or dislike, or what did they remember about their English studying experience? So I used both quantitative and qualitative based questions revolving around enjoyment. And in total, I had 154 university undergraduates respond to my questionnaire. And their proficiency ranged from A2 to B2 on the Stepford scale. And yeah, I was just really interested to see what would come about from this study. So talk a little bit about the results, and we could discuss the results as well. So here, what we have here is a comparison of FLE scores over time. So what we could see is on this Likert scale, number one corresponded to I hated it. In other words, I hated English during a particular time. Versus at the other end, we have number 7, I loved it. 4 would be just smack in the middle, neither here nor there. And so just looking at this, we can see, generally speaking, that the enjoyment of English tended to decline over time. So for example, looking at just this participants who rated their English study as a 7, in elementary school, we have 30 participants. By junior high school, that number dropped down to just 11, so only really a third of that same original 30. And then by high school, that number dwindled down even more to 8. If we look at, let's say, participants who rated a 3, which is really just the beginning of dislike, we would say in elementary school there was 13 participants who slightly disliked their English study, but that increased to 19 participants by junior high school, and then we have a really big increase to 35 when recalling their high school experience. So if we look at a comparison of the mean scores over time, what we could see is out of all participants, their overall elementary school rating, the mean rating among all 154 participants was a 4.68. Which is just slightly above the 4, the sort of middle mark. By the time they look at junior high school, this has crept down to 4.19, and by high school we've gone just below the middle mark into slight dislike at 3.93. So over time, if we're looking at our entire group, there is a steady decline in enjoyment over time. So I think it is important, and I think it is very useful to look at the big picture. It tells us sort of the general trend of dislike of English over time. But at the same time, I think it's also important and useful to look at the individual experience and individual level, because it gives us a different type of window into how students make sense of their English language experience, particularly as that changes or doesn't change from one educational stage to the next. So for the next few slides, we're going to look at some of those individuals. But first, so I took all 154 participants' scores, and I analyzed the different curves that came out of the responses. So looking at elementary school, junior high school, and high school enjoyment scores, I found that there is 9 different trends. So I'll quickly describe them. One is valley. So valley, it sort of describes the shape of the curve. The lowest FLE score would have been in junior high school. So it means that elementary school and high school had higher FLE scores relative to junior high school. Peak, you can sort of imagine as a mountain, would be the opposite of that. That would be that the highest FLE score would have been in junior high school, while elementary school and high school would have been lower. Falling puts the highest score in elementary school and the lowest score in junior high school. So it's a score that tends to be on the decline. Falling basin means that the highest FLE score is in elementary school, followed by a decline in junior high school, and a similar score in high school. So in other words, while there is a decline between elementary school and junior high school, the junior high school and high school score was relatively consistent or quite similar. Flat would be there's no change at all between all FLE scores across the 3 educational stages. So this could mean, for example, that a participant may be rated 777, that they loved English across all 3 stages. Or that could also mean that they scored, let's say, 222, that they didn't really like English across all 3 stages. So that's what flat is. Plateau fall means stable FLE scores in elementary school and junior high school, followed by a decline in high school. Basin rise is, again, stable in elementary school and junior high school, but with an increase for high school. Rising plateau is the lowest FLE score is in elementary school, followed by an increase in junior high school and a similar school or a stable score for high school. And then rising means lowest FLE score in elementary school, but the highest in high school. Visually, actually, sorry, in terms of their mean scores, we get these 9 trends of participants' FLE ratings and the aggregated mean of each stage of education. So we see on the right side, we have the frequency column. The most frequent curve or trend type was valley at 31, followed by peak and falling at 27 and 25, respectively. The least common was rising. So in other words, that the lowest score was in elementary school and the highest was in high school. That was quite a small proportion of the total number of responses. And visually, here we go, this is what the curves look like. So we can see that, we could see that for rising, even though it was a relatively small proportion of total participants or responses, it does hit the highest mark at about 6.5 by the time you hit high school. While the lowest would be falling. Falling dips down to about 2.5 on the 1 to 7 Likert scale. So again, looking at the individual level, I'd say there's 4 factors that really shaped students' understandings of the rise, fall of their FLE scores. and that would be teachers, difficulty, interest, and amount of communicative activities. So these four themes tended to appear in the qualitative parts of student responses. So looking at some examples, so here talking about teachers or the influence of teachers, we're looking at participant number 152. And so for this student, if you notice, they have a valley type of curve. So elementary school was rated 6, high school was also 6, but junior high school was rated a 2. They really didn't like it relative to their elementary and high school experience. But here I'm curious as to why. And so looking at the describe your experience part, the student wrote, I didn't like English in junior high school, but I found a good English teacher and my grades improved. So I came to like it. So here, this particular student also noted, so I have optional sections of the questionnaire for students who went to cram school and went to ACIE or a private English language school. And they could also rate their enjoyment of those periods across elementary school, junior high school, and high school where applicable, as well as add some qualitative comments too. And for this student, participant number 152, they also noted that their junior high school cram school experience was a 4, so sort of middle. But they did say that their teacher was kind. And so I think that in this student's first sentence of describing their experience, I didn't like English in junior high school, but found a good English teacher and my grades improved, so I came to like it. I think that emphasis, that contrast, or that juxtaposition, sorry, between junior high school and high school, with an emphasis on finding a good teacher, really emphasizes the importance of having a good teacher in how that shaped their enjoyment or experience of studying English. I think that's really important for this particular participant. Continuing on, this is another participant number 1. Their curve starts off at a 1 for elementary school. They're sort of, most participants actually relatively liked their elementary school experience, probably because when they were in elementary school, the Ministry of Education's curriculum had it more as a sort of introducing English as opposed to being a real academic subject. So a lot of respondents recalled sort of fun and games and activities as opposed to having to study grammar and so forth. And so by the time this particular participant got to junior high school and high school, they quite enjoyed it. Actually, they gave it the highest possible score, 7. And why? What about their experience to what extent were teachers important in their understanding of their experience? So number 1, elementary school, I didn't know what the teachers were saying. So here, there's a bit of, in terms of finding fault in that experience, they point the finger at teachers and not being able to understand what they were saying. In contrast, for junior high school, giving it a high score of 7, said I was praised by the teacher at school. So the participants were allowed to write anything they want in terms of describing their experience of a particular stage. So students could talk about teachers, they could talk about their friends, and they could talk about games, and many students did all of those things. But in highlighting particular themes, like teachers in this case, it does shed light on what's important or significant to the student, at least at the time that they filled out this questionnaire. Ask them a day later and that might be different, but as a snapshot in time, I think we could get some interesting insights into how students make sense of their experiences. So here, at least for junior high school, they are praised by their teacher in junior high school, and that was really important to them. This same participant, down here at the bottom I have a little note, rated their junior and high school cram experience also as a 7, so they really loved it. But interestingly, they also raise the theme of teachers again. So their junior high school cram school teacher was interesting. The teacher who taught English Continues also was kind. So in recalling their teachers, either in negative or positive light, I think it gives like a pretty good indication of what's important to this to participant number one. Continuing on, one of the other themes we talked about in the responses is difficulty. So how hard or how easy the study of English was. So this is participant number 16. They said of their junior high school experience, which they rated the perfect 7. They have also an interesting contrast here. So at first, I disliked reading English. However, when I entered the school, I learned how to read long sentences from my English teacher. And I became so good at English that I could almost get a perfect score in English. I loved it. So here, they're making, again, that contrast between entering junior high school and what they perceive to be a low proficiency in reading English, but in connecting with this teacher who seemed to be able to, teach them how to read at a higher level, led to the student loving English, giving it a perfect 7. Looking down at high school, the high school experience was rated a 3 out of 7, so that's just the beginning of dislike on the Likert scale. Interestingly, in talking about their high school experience, they bring up junior high school. So in junior high school, I liked English because I could read sentences without knowing the meanings of many words. But in high school, the number of words increased, and I didn't like it anymore. There was a foreign student from Finland for 6 months, so I had more conversations with her and actively spoke English with her. So here we could see difficulty, or how easy or hard English was, particularly English reading. English reading seems to be something that really is important to this student. Once the ability to read in English became harder and more difficult in high school, her enjoyment declined, both in terms of her score, but also in her own recollections of it. He says, I didn't like it anymore by the time she got to high school. And if anything, sort of a flashpoint or a moment of enjoyment comes from this Finnish student. But that recollection is not about reading, it's about speaking. So it gives, again, that's a bit of a contrast to her dislike of English reading in high school. So the third thing that came up was interest. So how interested or disinterested students were in their English classes. So several participants noted interest or lack of interest in their English studies. So they might have said it wasn't interesting, or it was very interesting, or the teacher is interesting. Students who expressed interest in their study tended to give favorable scores, while those who indicated lack of interest tended to give unfavorable scores. So that's probably not very surprising, but it is one of the main themes that came up. In terms of things that students found interesting or didn't find interesting, a lot of times it was teachers. Teachers were cited as being interesting or not interesting, but also course content. So students would say, oh, we did a lot of grammar, so I was not very interested. Or they'd say, oh, we played a lot of games, which is really fun and interesting. So perhaps unsurprisingly, the more interested students are in their English study, the more likely they are to enjoy it. Okay, and the last theme that came up was on communicative activities. So participant number 132 gave 7 and 7 for elementary and junior high school, while that declined significantly by high school with a 3. So why? So in junior high school, this participant wrote, I could communicate and learn with my friends. Okay, so communication is highlighted here. But in high school, the student writes, in high school, I didn't like idioms and grammar because I had to memorize them all the time. But in university, it's easy to learn because we learn while communicating with each other. I wanted to change from memorizing to communicating and engaging in English. So here we sort of have an interesting, a few different compare and contrast. So on the one hand, we have junior high school, where they highlight communication and learning with friends. So there's a social aspect of her education, and she loved it. High school, by contrast, she found difficult to study idioms and grammar because it was often about memorization. But then she sort of looks to the present of when the student was taking the questionnaire, and said it's easier to learn in university because they can communicate with each other, they can communicate with their peers and their friends. So this is sort of like they're finding similarities between their junior high school experience of studying English and their present day sort of English study experience in university. High school, by comparison, is the odd one out. They continue by saying, I wanted to change from memorizing to communicating and engaging in English, which this participant was talking about their high school experience. So in bringing up the present day university study experience of communicating and working with peers and speaking, she's sort of looking back and wishing that she had that type of I guess, classroom in her high school days. I also want to note that that out of all the participants who responded, no participant said there was too much English communication class. So if there was any mention of communicative activities or communication English, it was often in the sense of, I wish there was more, or I wanted more. There's never, there's too much, so I didn't like it, which I think I personally found a little surprising, because there's often the perception of, or there's a lot of research, of course, on student anxiety, foreign language anxiety, particularly in Japan, that sort of spotlights the fear or maybe discomfort in speaking English, whereas in this particular study, that the sort of negative aspects of communication didn't really come up. It was more a yearning for more, which I found interesting. So moving forward, what do we do with all this? Or what do I do? What have I tried to do with all of this? So first, a few limitations. So questionnaires, of course, it's most convenient. It doesn't take very long. Time commitment was about 5 to 10 minutes. And I was able to get quite a bit of data within a relatively short amount of time, which is great. Of course, one of the critiques could be, well, you're not really getting very much out of each individual. Something like an interview could like to delve more deeply, and I think that's true. But interviewing also has its own downsides too. One is time commitment. Trying to get a student to contribute their valuable time to sit down for 20, 30 minutes or more to just talk about their English study experience, that's asking, depending on the student, it's asking quite a lot from them. And so so that is a potential, that's definitely a hurdle. And also I'd like to say that even though in an interview setting, sure, I couldn't get, let's say, more words out of students, I wouldn't necessarily say so black and white that would be a better form of narrative. It'd just be a different version, and that the context in which our data is created matters. And so, of course, I'm trying to remember, and I'd like to just say that the responses I got out of my questionnaires were created out of a very particular context of a 5 to 10 minute questionnaire, Likert scale, and a short answer section, which is just different, but by no means better or worse than other forms of data collection. And so since then, I've tried to integrate some of the relevant student themes into my own classes. So, trying to bring some more peer work, trying to support more, of course, students, and also trying to use other ways to get students to reflect on their own language learning experiences, such as using old pictures and old textbooks, English textbooks, to try to sort of jog their memory, I guess, to try to get them to connect to a certain experience that they may have had in the past. And so in terms of trying to foster to increase FLE in the classroom, I'd say just trying to provide one-on-one and small group focused support, if possible. Trying within the class to speak one-on-one with students sometimes, even if it's just a how are you, how's it going, just trying to make students feel that they matter or they are of value within a class or within their small groups that they're working in, if they are working in small groups. Giving appropriate scaffolding. So a lot of students responded that the instructions weren't clear from their teachers. So I think giving proper scaffolding, direction, follow-up is really important. Preparing varied approaches to generate and maintain interest. So there's value in doing things quite consistently from week to week because it can limit anxiety, studies show. But at the same time, I think it's also useful to vary it up a little bit to keep students a little on their toes and bring something new to the table that may be interesting. And then the last one is to try to create sort of safe, comfortable opportunities for students to engage with both the teacher as well as their peers, preferably in English. So whether that's group work, pair work, switching partners, things like that. And these are just a few things, little things, and maybe some things that require a bit more planning, things that we could do to bring up the FLE in our classrooms and hopefully have just a more enjoyable but also productive English class. So thanks for watching today. Thanks for taking some time out to check out my video. I'd love to hear from you. Any feedback, positive, negative, neutral, questions, you can contact me at the email just down here, sok, S-O-K, at mail.kusan-u.ac.jp, and I'm at Kyushu Sangyo University. So thank you for watching and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.